Markets are trading this like the Hormuz story is over, but the structure says otherwise. What looks like a clean reopening may actually be a conditional pause with the same core risks still in place. A new geopolitical chess match has begun around the Strait of Hormuz, and markets are behaving as if the endgame has already arrived. They are buying the idea that Iran opened the strait, promised never to close it again, and has essentially agreed to Washington's demands. That is Donald Trump's version. Iran is saying something very different, and that gap is exactly why the current market optimism may prove dangerously complacent. The key point is that Iran did not announce genuinely free navigation. The Iranian message was that traffic can move through designated channels under Iranian control. Ships must register, present documents, and pay security fees. The practical change, at least in principle, is that even American and Israeli commercial vessels could use those controlled routes. But that is not Tehran giving up control of Hormuz. It is Tehran formalizing that control and continuing to monetize it. Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi tied this move to the Lebanon ceasefire. Like, that alone means it was conditional, not permanent. Like, Hezbollah was not really part of that arrangement. Netanyahu's unhappy with it, and both actors still have the capacity to destabilize the situation. So the market reading of problem solved is already too simplistic. Trump nonetheless thanked Iran and declared that Tehran had agreed never to close the Strait of Hormuz again. But statements from the Iranian side point in the opposite direction. The passage is supposed to run through Iranian-controlled waters near Larak Island. Only commercial ships are allowed, not military ones. Iran decides which vessels qualify. Ships linked to enemies can be excluded. Security fees continue, and the Revolutionary Guards are supposed to coordinate every transit. That is not permanent free passage under normal international maritime rules. It is Iran asserting sovereignty and control. The contradiction gets even sharper because Trump also said the United States would continue its own blockade until Iran signs a broader deal. So even his own narrative is internally inconsistent. Iran's response is that if Washington keeps blocking, then the ceasefire logic is being violated, and Tehran can reconsider the opening altogether. In other words, this is not a stable settlement. It is a fragile, conditional maneuver inside an unresolved standoff. There is also a clear split inside Iran itself. About 20 minutes after Araghchi's tweet, the Revolutionary Guards reportedly warned that any warship approaching Hormuz could be treated as violating the ceasefire and could be fired upon. That points to the familiar divide between the more pragmatic camp around President Pezeshkian and Araghchi and the much harder line of the Guards. Markets may be pricing Trump's words and Araghchi's gesture, but they are not pricing the possibility that the Guards reassert themselves the moment they feel humiliated or bypassed. That internal split matters even more because Tehran appears to have had pressing financial reasons to make a move. The source points to a disruption at Bank Sepa on April 5th that affected payments to the Revolutionary Guards, along with broader dissatisfaction inside the regime and a need for more income from Hormuz-related fees. From that perspective, Iran's step looks less like capitulation and more like a tactical attempt to raise cash, signal limited openness, and buy time without surrendering leverage. This is why Trump's line that Iran agreed to everything looks more like political theater than fact. Iranian officials have not confirmed that they agreed to stop uranium enrichment, even though Trump has said they did. On the contrary, the Iranian side has argued that part of any deal would involve the release of frozen Iranian funds, and that has not happened. So the sweeping claim that everything is settled is not supported by the visible facts. The same problem shows up in Trump's statements about sea mines. He first said the mines in Hormuz had already been cleared, then said the United States was working with Iran to remove them. Those are not the same claim. If the mines were laid chaotically, if the exact locations are uncertain, and if the relevant U.S. mine clearing assets are not even in position, then the idea that the waterway is suddenly clean and safe is at best unverified. That is one reason shipping companies are still cautious. They are not rushing back into a zone where the military and legal situation remains murky. The Lebanon connection matters as well. Iranian officials have made clear that they see Hormuz, Lebanon, and the wider regional conflict as linked. Some have framed any real ceasefire as requiring a broader end to the war, stretching from Lebanon to the Red Sea. Hezbollah does not see the current arrangement as satisfactory, and Netanyahu has already signaled that Israel's campaign against Hezbollah is not finished. Those are two major wildcards. Washington appears to have pressured Israel because Tehran made that linkage a precondition for talks. Even if Trump later tried to deny the connection, if either side escalates, the entire Hormuz story can be thrown back into crisis. So why overstate the situation? The answer is straightforward. Trump needed a visible success for U.S. politics and for markets. A story about Iran backing down, shipping reopening, and nuclear concessions being won in one sweep is exactly the kind of narrative that pushes risk assets higher, especially into options expiration and a long weekend. But tanker traffic does not normalize because of a social media post. You cannot safely move hundreds of thousands of tons of oil through one of the world's most sensitive choke points just because one side tweets victory. What this really looks like is a game of chicken. Iran made a tactical move because it needed money and saw an opening. Trump answered with a victory narrative because he needed momentum and market relief. Neither side has actually resolved the underlying conflict. The gap between their public claims is still too wide. The military risks are still real. And the political link to Lebanon and Hezbollah is still active. Markets have already booked this as a win, even though the structure remains fragile. There is also a broader geopolitical cost for Washington. If Trump let himself get pulled into a strategic mistake here, China stands to benefit. Beijing can present itself as steady and predictable, while the United States looks erratic and improvisational. In a situation where credibility matters as much as firepower, that matters. The bottom line is simple. This is not peace, not a full Hormuz reopening, and not proof that Iran accepted every American demand. It is a contested, conditional, tactical pause in the middle of a larger chess match. Anyone treating it as a clean, all clear is ignoring the actual structure of the situation. And with equities already stretched near the upper end of a very long-term trend channel, chasing this as if all risk has vanished looks especially dangerous.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay informed, stay rational. See you in the next one.